Muhammad Iqbal believed in the life of Islam as a cultural force. He envisioned that the development of Shariat or an Islamic way of life depended upon the creation of one or more Muslim states with absolute majorities. Muhammad Ali Jinnah had argued that if the majority status of Hindus entitled them to represent an Indian nation, there was no reason why the Muslim community, which represented absolute majority in clearly defined areas, could not make similar claims for itself. The Congress emphasized upon the principle of majority rule and fluid political alignments. They were not convinced about Jinnah's two-nation theory and equitable sharing of power. Thus, the history of India in the 1940s is marked by a series of failures to arrive at a constitutional settlement.
After the end of the war, there was a brief period when there was a great display of Hindu-Muslim unity. In fact, Hindu-Muslim, Sikh, Christian unity, and that happened on the occasion of the INA trials. The story of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and the Indian National Army that he had raised was propagated, and common people in India came to know about it.
On the night of 16th and 17th of January 1941, Netaji, with the help of his nephew Shishir, completely fooled the British guards and fled from his house in Elgin Road in Kolkata, where he was under house arrest. He went to Germany and united the British Indian soldiers held as prisoners of war in Germany and Italy. He appealed to them to be loyal to their motherland and their people instead of the Imperial Britain. Later, in the midst of the raging Second World War, he went to Japan in a submarine and from Japan to Singapore. July 1943, Netaji announced to the world that India's Army of Liberation, the Azad Hind Fauj, had come into being. Tens of thousands of British Indian soldiers had joined this army. 2.5 million Indians living in Southeast Asia vowed to give unconditional support to them. On 18th March 1944, Azad Hind Fauj crossed the Indo-Burma border and planted the tricolour on the Indian soil. However, the Japanese could not continue to lend support to the INA, and they had to beat a retreat from Imphal. In 1945, Netaji allegedly died in a plane crash. After the end of the Second World War, thousands of INA soldiers returned home.
The Indian National Congress, of course, came out in support of the INA prisoners. Even the Muslim League came out in support of the INA prisoners because, as you know, in the INA there had been a disproportionate number of Muslim and Sikh officers and soldiers who had fought for India's freedom.
In the autumn of 1945, at the Red Fort in Delhi, there was a public trial of 3 INA officers, Gurbakh Singh Dhillon, Shah Nawaz Khan and Prem Sehgal. They were charged with treason against the British Crown. The trials gave the Indian people a complete picture of an organization of which they had hitherto known very little.
Before our trial started, the British had kept everything concerning Netaji's movement, the INA, everything under wraps. People didn't know anything about it. The whole idea was that they wanted to show to the Indian people that a few renegades had joined the Japanese. But once the trial started, the truth came out. And when the truth came out, it had impact not only in the Indian public, but also in the British Indian Army.
Saigal, Dhillon, Shahnawaz had to be released and their sentences withdrawn. On the 18th of February 1946, the ratings of the Royal Indian Navy rose in open mutiny. The mutiny assumed serious proportions.
After the INA trials, the Naval Mutiny in February of 1946, disaffection among Indian soldiers within the British Indian Army, the British came to the conclusion that they would have to quit India. They could not rely on the armed forces, on Indian soldiers anymore to hold India down. So at that stage, the issue became, how was power going to be shared once the British quit India?
In the general elections in Britain after the Second World War, Churchill was defeated and Labour Party came to power. Clement Attlee became the Prime Minister of Britain. He inherited a nation ravaged by the war. His government realized that with the drained economy, it will not be possible to hold on to the empire. On 19th February, Attlee announced that 3 members of the cabinet would visit India to promote the early realization of full self-government in India. Later, on 15th of March, he referred to complete independence as a possible goal of Indian constitutional development, if the Indian leaders so chose. In March 1946, the cabinet mission arrived in New Delhi. The mission was headed by Stafford Cripps.
This time he did not come alone as he had done in 1942, but he came with 2 others. And the cabinet mission held talks in the course of the spring and summer of 1946 with the various political parties and the political leaders in India. And ultimately, there were 2 options that were put forth by the cabinet mission. One was very similar to the Rajagopalachari formula of 1944, that there would be a Pakistan based on the partition of Punjab and Bengal. And it is interesting that the Muslim League and Jinnah categorically rejected this option.
Jinnah declared that by dividing the Pakistan group into 2, the mission had struck at the heart of Muslim solidarity. The mission's new proposals were clearly designed to deny his community legitimate right to parity and self-determination.
The other option was for a federal or confederal structure. There would be a 3-tiered constitutional structure. There would be the provinces at the lowest level. Then there would be 3 groups of provinces at the middle level, A, B and C, and 2 of these groups would have Muslim majorities in the northwest and in the east or northeast. And then of course there would be the largest group which would have a Hindu majority. And finally at the top level there would be a federal center. Now initially both the Indian National Congress and the All India Muslim League accepted this option.
The League accepted the mission's plan on 6th June. Its acceptance was based primarily on the assurance that the proposed interim government would ensure parity by allocating 5 portfolios to the League, 5 to the Congress, and 2 to the remaining minorities.
This option was attractive to Jinnah and the All India leadership of the Muslim League because at the group level they could try and control the provincial particularisms of the Muslim majority provinces. The All India leadership of the Muslim League had great difficulty in disciplining their own followers in provinces like Punjab, Bengal, and so forth. And so it was attractive. And the Congress also thought that this was one way to avert partition and to avoid conceding Pakistan.
The Congress rejected the Viceroy's proposal of an interim government, but agreed to participate in the Constituent Assembly in order to frame the Constitution. The Cabinet mission left India on the 29th June.
But then in early July of 1946, on 11th July of 1946 to be precise, Jawaharlal Nehru, who had recently become president of the Congress, he had taken over from Maulana Azad, made a rather provocative statement saying that grouping may not last. Who were the British to tell us what kind of constitution we might have 10 years from now, and so forth. And this, upset Jinnah and the Muslim League a great deal, because they had thought that they were coming to a settlement with the Indian National Congress on the basis of the Cabinet Mission Plan, the crux of which was the grouping of provinces. So at that stage, the All India Muslim League gave the call for direct action.
Direct Action Day proved to be a black letter day in the history of India. Tens of thousands of Muslims gathered in rallies at Calcutta. Rioting led to mass murder and Hindu reprisals. The local blacksmiths worked round the clock producing weapons. 5,000 were dead in 72 hours. It was a mayhem, the like of which India had not experienced before. Gopal Chandra Mukhopadhyay, an octogenarian living in Kolkata, records,
I became mad with revenge. I did not heed Gandhiji's appeal.
Jugal Ghosh recalls,
There was tremendous fear all over the city. Friends and neighbors had suddenly become enemies.
Gandhiji locked himself at Haidari Mansion in central Calcutta and announced fast unto death till the violence abated. It worked like a miracle. A tenuous peace was restored on the streets of Calcutta. However, the unrest engulfed other parts of the country. Noakhali, Tipera, and Bihar.
So the situation was going completely out of control at the provincial and the local levels from late 1946 onwards.
Gandhiji set off on a one-man peace mission to these trouble-torn areas.
But at this time, the Hindu middle classes of West Bengal and of Calcutta in particular were greatly influenced by the Hindu Mahasabha demand, and the official Congress was more or less following the Hindu Mahasabha's lead. And one can understand that there was great anxiety on the part of Hindus after what had happened in Calcutta in August 46 and in Noakhali and Tipera in October of 1946. So in many ways, the Hindus of West Bengal, who had so resolutely opposed the 1905 partition by Curzon, now became proponents of a partition of Bengal that was being demanded by the Hindu Mahasabha, but also the All India leadership of the Congress. And in fact, the Muslim League newspaper Millat wrote an editorial article suggesting that the Hindus of Bengal, or at least some Hindus of Bengal, had been beset by Curzon's ghost, and they were now playing the role of Parashuram, raising the axe to slice mother into two. On the 20th of February 1947, Clement Attlee, the British Prime Minister, made a momentous statement. He said that the British were going to withdraw from India by the 30th of June of 1948 at the latest, come what may. And he then decided to send Mountbatten as the last viceroy.
On the 22nd of March 1947, Lord Mountbatten took office as the last Viceroy of India. His solitary mission was transfer of power, hand over the government of India to the Indians.
As soon as Attlee made this statement of 20th February 1947, the Hindu Mahasabha made a demand that Punjab and Bengal must be partitioned.
Shama Prasad Mukherjee of the Hindu Mahasabha wrote,
Hindus will resist with all their might any scheme of the perpetuation of slavery, which will be inevitable if Bengal, as she is constituted and administered today, is allowed to become a separate independent unit cut off from the rest of India.
On the 8th of March of 1947, Jawaharlal Nehru as Congress President also made a demand that Punjab must be partitioned. And he further said that the principle of partition may have to be extended to Bengal as well. So Mountbatten came. He held talks with leaders of the Congress, of the Muslim League, of the other political parties. And one of the things that happened in March 1947, after Nehru's 8th March statement, was that the situation in Punjab went completely out of control, and a great deal of violence began between Hindus and Muslims and also Sikhs. And of course, the Sikhs were still divided at that point, whether they would support the Congress or the Muslim League. It very often depended on where they were situated in the province of Punjab.
Sharad Bose, the elder brother of Netaji, wrote to Sardar Patel, I consider it most unfortunate that the Congress Working Committee conceded Pakistan and supported partition. I can say that it is not a fact that Bengali Hindus unanimously demand partition.
In April of 1947 and May, there was an attempt to preserve the unity of Bengal by propounding a plan for a united and independent Bengal. And this was led by Sharat Chandra Bose and also Abul Hashim and Hussain Shahid Sohrawardi. And initially, this united Bengal idea was supported by Mahatma Gandhi himself. And it was much later that he said that he had been taken to task for supporting Sharat Babu's plan. This seemed to be the only way that a religiously based partition of Bengal could be avoided. And Jinnah also, in April 1947, told Mountbatten categorically that there was no point in having a Pakistan in the east without Calcutta. Let them stay united and independent. I'm sure they will be on friendly terms with us.
Mountbatten asked the supporters of United Bengal to go out and prove that there was mass support for the idea. In the tense communal atmosphere of 1947, the leaders could not demonstrate their support base.
There were some Hindus, therefore, in West Bengal who were in favor of partition. There were some Hindus and Muslims led by Sharat Bose and Abul Hashim and Sohrawardi who were still trying to create a united and independent Bengal in an attempt to stop partition along religious lines.
Sharat Bose had risked his political career and his life in preserving the unity of Bengal. He made a desperate appeal to Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi lamented,
There was a time when mine was a big voice. Then everyone obeyed what I said. Now neither the Congress, nor the Hindus, nor the Muslims listen to me. I am crying in the wilderness.
In late May of 1947, Mountbatten went back to London to brief the government there on the status of his talks. And on the 28th of May 1947, he recorded two alternative broadcasts in London. According to one of those broadcasts, both Punjab and Bengal were candidates for partition. But according to the second of the broadcasts, Mountbatten said that the Hindu and Muslim leaders of Bengal had come to an agreement, and therefore Bengal would remain united and a free state, and would in the future decide its relations with the Indian Union, the existing Constituent Assembly, and any new Constituent Assembly, i.e. the Pakistan Constituent Assembly, that might be brought into existence. So even as late as the 28th of May 1947, the idea of a united and independent Bengal was alive and well. But then Mountbatten came back to Delhi on the 30th of May, and his broadcast B was emphatically vetoed by the Congress leaders Nehru and Patel.
Sardar Patel wrote to Saurabh Bose.
Vital matters which will leave their marks on generations to come have to be settled, and in such settlement it behoves all of us to contribute our best to the combined strength of the Congress.
Saurabh Bose replied,
I entirely agree with you that we should take a united stand, but I shall say at the same time that the united stand should be for a united Bengal and united India. Future generations will, I am afraid, condemn us for conceding division of India and supporting partition of Bengal and the Punjab.
On the 2nd of June, Mountbatten held a meeting with the leaders of the nationalist movement.
Jinnah said to Mountbatten, this is your plan, not mine. And Mountbatten said to Jinnah that if you don't accept this partition plan, you will lose your Pakistan, probably for good. And Jinnah responded, saying that what will be, will be. And at that point, Mountbatten said to Jinnah that if you don't accept this partition plan on behalf of the Muslim League, then I will. And more or less instructed Jinnah that at the meeting that was to be held the next day on the 3rd of June, he was not to contradict Mountbatten when he said that the Muslim League was prepared to accept the partition plan, and he would have to give his assent with a nod. Now, it's not clear whether Jinnah nodded or not at the meeting on the 3rd of June, but the Congress accepted partition as a final settlement, as they put it. The Muslim League eventually accepted partition as a compromise.
On the 3rd of June, Lord Mountbatten broadcast to the peoples of India, His Majesty's government should transfer power immediately to one or two successor governments, each having dominion status.
The broadcast that Mountbatten made on the 3rd of June said that the will of the people would be taken into account. How? Through votes taken by the members of the legislatures of Bengal and Punjab. And these votes were actually taken in late June. And the results of these votes are of some use to historians, because what becomes clear from these votes is that the legislators of Bengal and Punjab, by overwhelming majorities, rejected the partition plan. But Mountbatten had already decreed partition, because after all of the legislators of Bengal and Punjab had met together, they would also meet separately. The legislators of West Punjab and East Punjab, West Bengal and East Bengal.
At the joint session of the members of the Legislative Assembly, 90 voted to join the existing Constituent Assembly, while 126 voted to join the new Constituent Assembly of United Bengal. When the members met separately, members of the non-Muslim majority areas voted for partition, 58 to 21. Members of the Muslim majority areas voted against partition, 106 to 35.
So until the very end of the day, there was a distinction between the idea of a Pakistan and partition as it actually came about, which involved not just the partition of India in a notional sense, but the partition of two provinces, Punjab and Bengal, which had for long been proud of their cultural and linguistic unity. Now, all that remained, of course, was for the British Parliament to pass the Independence of India Act.
The Indian Independence Bill passed by the British Parliament on the 1st of July 1947 without any dissent, fixed upon 15th of August 1947 as the date for transfer of authority.
In a sense, partition as it came about was the ultimate undermining of his two-nation theory, because there were about 100 million Muslims in India at that stage. Only 60 million of these Muslims would become citizens of the Muslim homeland, Pakistan. Nearly 40 million would remain behind in India. So about 40% of his Muslim nation was going to live outside the borders of a specifically Muslim state. So this nation-state contradiction had not really been resolved by the kind of partition that was decreed by Mountbatten.
Be that as it may, all that was left to be done was to vivisect the provinces of Punjab and Bengal and create the moth-eaten nation of Pakistan.
চারধারে কি দেখছিস? ছেলেকে ঠেলা দিল ভূষণ। জল জংলার দেশ, দেখবার আছে কি? আসল জিনিস দেখবি তো চল ওপারে, আমাদের নিজের দেশে, নতুন দেশের নতুন জিনিস, মানুষ নয় জিনিস, নতুন জিনিসের নতুন নাম উদ্বাস্তু।